Hi, so in this video we're going to analyse a lesson by an experienced teacher. This is TESOL for young learners, and in this video I'm going to show you another video that has a teacher teaching young learners. There's lots of interesting things we can learn from watching this video, so before we watch the video I'm going to give you some things to think about. So we're going to watch the beginning part of a lesson by teacher trainer Raymond. Okay, so he's an experienced teacher, and we're just going to watch kind of the beginning few steps of the lesson. So what can we learn from watching this video? Well, first thing is we can watch and listen to the classroom language. There's lots of good examples of classroom language. So if you're not really sure about using classroom English, there's lots of good examples you can find in this video. Okay, we can also learn about setting the context. Okay, so at the beginning of an activity or a lesson, we need to kind of set the general topic and the context of the lesson. Also in this video are lots of good examples of how to use flashcards for presentation and for practice. Okay, so those are the two kind of main reasons why we'd be using flashcards for teaching vocabulary. Okay, as I mentioned, teaching vocabulary, so this lesson shows some scaffolding and some steps for teaching vocabulary. It also shows about teaching grammar, okay? So if you listen carefully, you will notice that there is some grammar teaching in this lesson. It's very interesting the way that the grammar teaching is done in this lesson. Okay, we can also, from this video, we can see about scaffolding. So the teacher we're going to watch has organized the steps very well, and some of the techniques that he uses are really good examples of scaffolding. Also, we can see some listening activities. So there's a few different listening activities towards the end of the video. And finally, organizing the steps of a lesson. So as I mentioned about scaffolding, the steps are well organized, well sequenced from the first beginning steps to the later steps. Okay, so before we watch the video, I want you to think about these questions. Okay, so number one, how does he set the context of the lesson? Okay, so listen very carefully at the beginning. Remember, the context is kind of the general or the wider topic or the situation where we might use the target language or grammar or expressions or vocabulary. Okay, so listen very carefully, see if you can find where he sets the context at the beginning. Okay, number two, how does he arouse students' curiosity? He uses some good techniques for getting their attention and keeping them focused. Number three, how does he implicitly teach grammar? Okay, so this is not an explicit grammar lesson, but he is teaching some grammar implicitly. See if you can notice. It's a very small point to find in the video, but you might be able to find it. Okay. Number four, how does he organize the class into groups? He has a good technique for organizing the class into two groups. Number five, how does he continually review the word? He has a very good routine for reviewing the words as he's going. And number six, how does he get the students to use their bodies? Okay, so there are some kinesthetic activities here. Number seven, any other aspects of his teaching or lesson that you noticed? Okay, so as you're watching, take note or think about anything that you notice that you like about his teaching. There's a lot of good little points that we can learn from watching this teacher. Okay, so we're going to watch the video in a moment. Now, the quality of the video is not so good, I'm sorry, but it's good enough for us to answer these questions and to discuss his teaching. Okay, so watch the video, think about these questions, and I'll see you on the other side.
Today is a special day for me.
Birthday.
It's my birthday, yes. How old am I, do you think?
30.
Thank you, Hussein, very good. 30?
90.
39?
35.
35, whoa!
36.
Sorry?
36.
36, what a good boy. He's my new friend.
31.
Thank you very much.
31.
This is my birthday bag. This is my birthday bag.
My birthday bag.
What do you think is in the bag?
Birthday. Toys.
Okay. For my... For, it could be a book, yes. It could be...
Shoes.
It could be...
Boots. Coat.
For me.
Trousers. Plane.
A toy plane. Can you repeat?
A toy plane.
A plane.
A plane.
A toy plane.
A toy plane.
Is a toy plane big or small?
Small.
Can we travel in a toy plane?
No.
No. We can play with it.
Yes.
Okay? So, in my bag, I have a toy plane. Fantastic. A toy plane. What else is in my bag?
A toy train.
It could be...
Tree. Robot.
Ah!
Robot.
A toy robot. And
Plane.
a toy
Robot.
plane. A toy plane.
A toy
A toy robot.
A toy robot.
Everybody, a toy plane.
A toy plane.
A toy robot.
A toy robot. Car. Train.
Okay. What else do you...
Doll.
Ali Burak's looking. He's very nosy.
Car.
Let's check.
Car. Car.
A balloon. Yes. In my bag, I have a balloon. A balloon.
Fly balloon.
Okay. I have a toy plane and a toy robot and a balloon. A balloon. Everybody, balloon. A toy plane. A toy robot. Robot. And a balloon. Fantastic. What's that? Okay, a board game. Board. A board. A board game. Good. In my bag, I have a toy plane, toy robot, a balloon, and a board game. Good, Hussein. Very good. A board game. Everybody? Fantastic. What else could there be in my bag? Huh? A real car or a toy car? A toy car. In my bag, my birthday bag, I have a toy plane and a toy robot, a balloon, and good boy, Ali, a toy car. Okay? A basketball. Yes, a basketball or a ball. A ball. A ball. Good boy. It is a basketball, and we can call it a ball as well. In my bag, my birthday bag, I have a toy plane, a toy robot, balloon, a toy car, and a ball. A teddy bear. Everybody, a teddy bear. Oh, do you like him?
Yes!
So, in my birthday bag, I have a toy car and absolutely fantastic. And
Train. Bike.
wow, a kite. Good girl. Uske knew that. Very good. A kite. Everybody? Kite. A kite. In my birthday bag, I have a toy plane. Fantastic. There's one more.
Train.
I don't, it could be.
Lorry.
A doll. Is this a good present for me? No. So a doll. A doll. In my bag. In my bag, I have a doll. Train. You want a train? Fantastic.
No.
Listen for your number. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. Hands up, number 1. Okay, sit down, please. Hands up, number 2. Good. Sit down. Listen. Thank you. Are we ready? Right. Number 1s, come here, please. In a line. When you hear the word, lift the present. Here. Not dance, not just now. When you hear the word, lift the present. Are you ready?
Yeah!
A toy car. Good boy. A plane. A toy plane. Good boy. A balloon. Good boy. A ball. Good. A board game. Good. A robot. Fantastic. A kite. A teddy bear. Fantastic. Is everybody here?
Yeah!
A doll. Fantastic. Okay. Listen, and when you hear the word, you do a dance. Are you ready?
Yes!
Good girl. A ball. Good, Celine. A kite. Ennis, that was fantastic. A board game. Fantastic. Be careful. A toy car. A doll. Fantastic.
Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that video, and I hope that it gave you some good ideas and you thought about the questions that I asked before you watched the video. Okay, so let's go over the questions and discuss what I think are the answers for these. Okay, number 1, how does he set the context of the lesson? Okay, so you might notice at the beginning of the lesson, he doesn't go straight into the target vocabulary, which is toys. Okay, so the topic and the language is toys. He doesn't go straight into that. He spends a little bit of time working on some context at the beginning. So here are some expressions that he says at the beginning of the video. Today is a special day for me. What day is it? How old do you think I am? And then he goes into his birthday bag. Okay, so what he's doing here is using birthday as a context for the topic of toys. Now, I think that's really interesting because he's thought in the planning stage, what kind of context can I give for this vocabulary? Okay, the vocabulary is toys, but he's given it like an extra layer of context around it. And he uses that as a way of like bringing them into the topic and warming up the subject. So I think that's a really nice example of contextualization. So the topic is toys, it's toy vocabulary. What other contexts could be useful for this lesson? Okay, have a think about that. Well, if this lesson was in November or December, we could use Christmas as a context. So show a picture of Santa and have Santa's bag and pulling toys out of the bag. What other contexts could we use? Well, in Korea, we could use Children's Day. Okay, so Children's Day is often a time where kids get toys. So if this lesson was any time around Children's Day, that could be the context. There are a few other contexts. We could use like toy shopping, going to a toy store like Toys R Us. We could also start with the bedroom, the student's bedroom, looking at pictures of bedroom, talking about toy box, and then pull out a toy box at the beginning of the lesson. Okay, so that's the context that he uses about birthday. I think it's a really useful suggestion when you're lesson planning to spend some time thinking about the context. And even if the context is a little bit removed from your main vocabulary or grammar, providing some context helps learners to kind of understand what situations or contexts this language would be used in. Okay, all right, let's move on. So number 2, how does he arouse the student's curiosity? Well, he uses the birthday bag in this lesson. Now, this is a really good technique, very powerful, and it has a few different names. It's sometimes called magic bag or magic box, or it can be called mystery bag or mystery box. And it's great because automatically you get the student's attention. They're curious about what you're going to pull out the box. You can ask questions, you can get hints, you can have them guessing. So there's lots of great ways you can do this. You can also do this with with students touching the objects inside. You could have realia. You could turn this into a team game. There's lots of different ways you can do this. So I suggest when you're teaching young learners, have a magic bag or a magic box ready, and sometimes you can use this to create a bit more kind of fun and motivation in your teaching. Okay, let's move on to number 3. Now, this one was a little bit challenging to find in the video. It's such a small thing, but it's actually really, really important. Possibly kind of one of the biggest suggestions in this video, actually. How does he implicitly teach grammar? Okay, now he wasn't explicitly teaching grammar. It was mainly a vocabulary lesson. But he was actually teaching grammar. Have a look at the expression here. In my bag, I have a toy plane, a robot, a balloon. Now notice, he's not just teaching a word. He's not just teaching vocabulary. What he's actually doing is he's teaching a chunk of words. Okay, and that's a really good way of teaching. If you teach words in a chunk, students are more likely to remember that chunk of words. And of course, words exist within the context of a sentence. And especially this one. So this is implicitly teaching indefinite article. And especially second language speakers often forget to use indefinite article. So this is a good suggestion. Next time you're teaching vocabulary, or nouns, I should say, teach it as a chunk with the article, and then your learners are more likely to remember to use the article when they are speaking. Okay, so that was some implicit grammar teaching. It was a little bit difficult to find, but really important point. Okay, let's move on. Number 4, how does he organize the class into groups? So he uses this really good technique, numbering technique. He says, listen and remember your number. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So he gives everybody a number. At the end, he asks, okay, number 1, put your hands up. Number 2, put your hands up. And he splits the class into 2 groups. Okay. This is a really great technique. I use this sometimes with university students, especially if I want to do some kind of discussion activity and I don't want them sitting next to their friends. Okay, so if you want to shift all the students around and get them talking to new people. This is a very quick and easy technique to get them moved into another group. Of course, you can use different numbers. So if you need 4 groups, you can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to get 6 groups, okay? So it's very quick and easy. And you can also use this for young learners if you need like 2 teams, if you're doing some kind of other kind of running activity or something like that as well. Okay, so in one of my other videos, I mentioned about Kagan's structures. And if you're interested in organizing the class into groups and different types of group activities, Kagan's structures gives you some good ideas about how to organize groups and the roles in groups and things like that. Okay, let's move on. So, number 5, how does he continually review the words? Well, you may have noticed that as he introduced the new word, he would spend a minute on the new word, repeating and asking some questions. And then he would go back to the beginning of the whiteboard and go through all of the previous words again. Okay, so he had a very clear routine, and the way he was teaching was very clearly structured. Especially, and this is one of my favorite parts of the video, he stops repeating the words and he turns around to pick up a pointer stick. Okay, and as he does that, the students are still going through the words, reviewing, repeating the previous vocabulary. And that just shows that he's set up this routine so clearly that the students are easily following. They know their role. They know what they have to do. Okay, they're not lost. They're not unsure. He's very clearly trained them. This is the structure of how we're learning and reviewing these words. So I think that's a really good tip. And he's reviewing the words. Very important for young learners especially, because they need lots of exposure, lots of practice. Okay, let's move on. Number 6, how does he get the students to use their bodies? Okay, so of course, later in the lesson, in some of the later steps, the students do the activity where they listen and hold up the flashcard. And then the second step of the listening is listen and do a dance. Okay, so he's got 2 steps for listening. And I like this because it's a kinesthetic activity. It's getting the students moving. It's also listening. So at the beginning he does more, he sets up the context at the beginning, and then he does the vocabulary, and then he does the listening activities. Okay. Now I guess that later on in the lesson he switches to speaking, but what we saw of the lesson is well structured, going from vocabulary to listening. Okay. And also the activity that he does, it's a kinesthetic activity, but it's very flexible because some vocabulary can or cannot easily be taught with mimes. Okay, so if I give some examples, like verbs and sports are very easy to do mimes. Okay, but the toys that he did, that's not an easy set of vocabulary to include a kinesthetic activity. But listen and hold up and listen and dance, they are kinesthetic activities that can be done with any vocabulary. There's another example here on the slide. You can see the young children are holding colours. Now, of course, think about a kinesthetic activity with colours. It's a little bit difficult to think of, right? Because colours don't really lend themselves to kinesthetic types of activities. So listen and hold up, listen and dance, things like listen and point, listen and clap. Those are TPR activities that you can do with any vocabulary. Okay, so that's a nice suggestion. And finally, any other aspects of his teaching or lesson plan that you noticed? Well, one of the things that a lot of people mention about his teaching is the way that he encourages and really motivates. He praises the students a lot. Okay, so he uses a lot of kind of encouragement. He's getting them to speak out very well, and even from the beginning of the lesson, he's getting the students shouting and getting them involved. Okay, he's not trying to keep them silent all the time. He's encouraging their input, and I think that's a really good style of teaching, especially for young learners. Channel their energy, get their energy focused on the lesson. Okay, so that's one thing that's often mentioned. Another thing is just generally the overall structure of the lesson. Think about the way it was organized. At the beginning, he had a nice warm-up and the context setting to get their attention. And then he had the vocabulary step with introducing vocabulary, checking questions, and reviewing vocabulary. And then he moved towards the listening. Okay, remember listening before speaking. So I guess that later on in that lesson, he would move towards some kind of speaking activities like a guessing activity or information gap to get students speaking the target vocabulary. But what we saw was just the beginning of the lesson, and I think there's so much we can learn from that video. Okay, so I hope that was useful and it gave you some good practical ideas about teaching. Thank you.